Hey everybody, this is Michael Mann from Michael Mann Security Services, and this is a podcast dedicated to helping you protect the people and things you love most. And remember, it's about prevention, not response.
Well, the topic for this episode is church security. Now, Michael, we've talked about school security. We're going to flip over to houses of worship. Now, this unfortunately is something that I don't think early on in my life I had ever seen scenarios where people were shooting in churches. Now we see this. And so this is kind of, at least for me, a new thing to see. Church security, big topic, but let's start small. Why are churches of any size in a situation where they'd have to secure themselves? Aren't these supposed to be places of peace and comfort and tranquility and worship? Aren't they supposed to be havens?
Absolutely. This is a big topic now, and churches, which it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. They do fall victim to these violent incidents because of just system weaknesses or vulnerability. So think about when you go to church, when you walk in the door. If we have enough greeters and everybody showed up to volunteer that day, you might be greeted at the door. And then as you go into the sanctuary, you go into your Sunday school room. You go into worship, you're not thinking about anything else. Most of the time, people face away from the doors. If you think about the way most sanctuaries are set up in most classrooms, the doors are to your back. And so because it is a place of worship, people feel at peace, and they don't worry about violence when they're in church. And so just because of society and just because of where we are today, they've become a target and it's what some people will call soft targets. They're just not defended very well, or people really just aren't paying attention.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up the backs facing the entrance of the church. You know, you never really think about that. I've always thought about that when I think about going into a restaurant. I'm the kind of guy who's like, I want to face the door.
Yep.
We're sitting in a booth. I tell my wife,
Yeah.
I go, let me sit here. I want to, and that's just maybe the army in me. But you go to church, man, that's like the last thing on your mind.
Yeah.
You're thinking, I got to drop the kids off at Sunday school. The worship is starting. I'm going to be listening to the sermon. I'm going to be praising God. It's the last thing on your mind. But what you said is so powerful. Everybody's backs are to the door.
Yeah.
What a terrible vulnerability.
Yeah.
So I guess that would then require a strong security team in place.
Yeah. So either we rearrange the church and we redesign what we've been doing for...
There's some church committees right now.
Hold on one second. Calm down, everybody. Calm down.
There's some church committees out.
So yes, it is. It's the use of the body to be on the lookout and to be watching.
Get everybody involved.
To get everybody involved. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about that then. Who typically gets involved in church security?
From my experience so far, it's been whoever will volunteer to do it. Number one. So church security, again, from my experience talking to churches and houses of worship, it's whoever is going to step forward to take on the responsibility. And so, but there's most of the guys or gals that are interested in that are the people that have like a military law enforcement background.
And so these are people who come from all sorts of backgrounds. Some of them have military backgrounds. Some of them have police backgrounds. But you said it's anybody really who volunteers then. So,
yeah.
Is there a stereotype for this person then? If you walk into one church out of 100, would you be able to identify the security person kind of just by looking at them?
Sure, it's the guy not smiling, walking around, with the short hair, the headpiece and the earpiece in his ear. That's kind of the stereotype, right? And
awesome.
It's
not the lady in the wheelchair.
No, it's not. It's not.
Her.
No.
Let's talk about security during service and security before and after service, right?
Sure.
Because I know I pastored a church, and I know that a lot of times, this is kind of a crazy thing to say, but a lot of times people target church parking lots during service. They'll go break in at cars, or they'll try and get people's items while they're inside. And so what we actually instituted were roving usher patrols that would kind of walk the parking lots. This is so crazy to even think about, but during service, just walking the parking lot to make sure that people know you're not going to be able to target cars. It's a terrible thing to think about, and that you would have to do that at church. But I mean, that's during service security. But then there's also security before and after. What do some of those things look like?
Yeah, just overall, understanding when the service starts. So you're absolutely right. Something needs to happen before. So there needs to be a setup before the people start to come in, and there needs to be people. There need to be someone in place, or needs to be a team in place that as people leave to go back to the parking lot and to get in their cars and to leave the service or leave the church, they need to be standing by until that happens. The most important piece of this, there's all kinds of physical security design features, but here, the way this works is what we call a layered defense or concentric rings. And so what that means is I've got some people that are trained to understand what to look for. They're in the parking lot, they're at the door, and they're inside the building and possibly in the sanctuary looking for those very, very specific things or behaviors.
How do you set up church security in a way that it doesn't feel like you're going through TSA screening where the usher is going to grope you on your way in?
Yeah. So just had this conversation this past Sunday. So security at church looks much different than it does in the world. And so security, so let me just ask you this. I'll jump back over in the host seat again.
No, come on. You keep taking over your seat here.
When you think about security, what do you think about?
Well, are we talking about church security?
Yeah, or just security in general. Like when you,
Sure.
like you go to the airport. What do you think?
Yeah,
about?
when I think about security, first thing that comes to my mind is maybe badges, guns, uniforms, organized bands of people, filing people through lines.
Yeah, and so church security looks the opposite of that, and so it's very welcoming. It's using the part of the body that are in these areas, the parking lot, the doors, inside the building. And they've been trained to look for very specific things, and we don't stop. We don't ask for badges. We don't search backpacks. Only when very specific behaviors or actions are identified, that's when there's a question. And it's not that we're going up to stop people. We're not patting them down. There's just a way to talk to someone and determine whether or not that's going to be a problem. Yeah. And so it's not stopping people. It's not bringing people through two doors and locking
checking
all the rest of them.
Metal detectors.
Absolutely not. When we start to look at the mission of the church, that conflicts with the mission. And that's another physical security design feature that we don't conflict with the organization.
You know what we could reinstitute? If we as a Christian culture reinstituted the sacrificial system, people could start bringing animals in, and then we could have dogs.
Absolutely.
And no one would notice the dogs. The dogs could be sniffing out bombs and guns.
Absolutely.
And it's like, oh no, he's got a cow over there. And there's a German Shepherd. I don't know if churches would get on board with
Probably
that.
Probably not.
What's the most important thing for somebody to take away from a church security conversation in a 10-minute podcast?
That it has to be welcoming, number one. Number two, that we use the body. We use the resources that are already in place. Three, as we use that body needs to be very specifically trained on what to look for. And four, the function itself must be part of the church, which means that security team or that safety team must be a ministry, which there are three parts to that. Number one, service to the church. Number two, fellowship with each other as a team or as a function. And number three, service to the community. They are out doing other work outside of the church to spread the word of Jesus Christ. Those are the most important things to take away when we start to talk about in a podcast for church security. Those are the elements of a church or safety security function.
Well, thanks for listening to this Michael Mann Security Services podcast. This one has been about church security. There's a lot of other podcasts you can listen to, things about school security, the mindset and situational awareness, maybe how to use force, selecting a handgun and learning how to be trained on that. Check out the whole collection. You can find Michael. Now, I'm Stephen. I'm guest hosting for Michael, but you can find him on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and MichaelMannSecurityServices.com. See you next time.